The email wasn't even addressed to her, at least, not officially. It had been sent to dozens of high-profile women in politics and media, an exclusive summit hosted in Manhattan. Future of Female Leadership was the headline, and the speaker list read like a who's who of Democratic royalty. Senators, journalists, and, at the top of the list in bold lettering, keynote speaker, Hillary Rodham Clinton. Karoline Leavitt wasn't on the program. She wasn't mentioned in the press release. And yet, the email had still found its way into her inbox. Possibly by mistake, possibly by design. Most people in her shoes would have ignored it. After all, showing up to an event where you're clearly not wanted isn't just risky, it's political suicide. But Karoline wasn't most people. She'd been excluded before, mocked, dismissed, told to wait her turn. The daughter of a New Hampshire working-class family, she hadn't grown up surrounded by political royalty. She hadn't been groomed for power. Everything she had, she'd earned, clawed, through grit, unapologetic values, and an unshakable belief that truth didn't need permission to be spoken. So she booked her flight, and she didn't tell a soul. When Karoline walked into the Conrad Ballroom that afternoon, the air was heavy with practiced smiles and scripted confidence. Power suits in shades of blue and ivory. Every table had carefully arranged name cards, none of which bore her name. But her presence was like a sharp breeze cutting through silk, clean, cold, unmistakable. She didn't walk in loud. She didn't need to. Her confidence was quieter than thunder, but more disarming. The host tried to usher her toward the back of the room. "The press table is that way," the woman said with an empty smile, mistaking her for staff. Karoline smiled politely and didn't move. And somewhere near the stage, Hillary Clinton looked up from her notes, furrowed her brow, and leaned over to a handler. Who let her in? The answer was no one. Karoline had let herself in, and she wasn't planning on leaving quietly. The stage buzzed with final adjustments. Microphones were being tested, water bottles aligned, and Hillary Clinton stood behind the curtain in a calm but firm conversation with her chief of staff. The whispers were terse. "She wasn't invited," Hillary said, brushing imaginary dust off her white blazer. Her voice was low but unmistakably irritated. "She's not on the list, not even on the waiting list, and now she's here?" The aide tried to downplay it. "She's not speaking. Let's keep it smooth, don't give her the spotlight." But Karoline didn't need anyone to give her anything. She was already making herself known. In the room, on social media, and in the expressions of half the audience who were whispering her name. Some in surprise, some in curiosity, others in quiet admiration. A young intern, clipboard shaking in her hands, approached Karoline near the side aisle. "Ma'am," she stammered, "I was told to let you know that this isn't, an open forum. Only confirmed speakers will be given mic access." Karoline tilted her head. "That's fine," she said, calm as ever. "I don't need a mic to speak. I just need to be heard." The intern blinked, unsure whether she was being threatened or inspired. She turned and fled. Across the ballroom, the tension was rising like steam before a storm. Attendees checked their phones. Karoline's name had already started trending on X. Posts like, "Karoline Leavitt just walked into Hillary's turf. Something's coming. She wasn't invited, but she's there. Front row. Stone cold." Backstage, Hillary gritted her teeth. "She's going to pull something," she said. "She always does." A stage manager leaned in with a clipboard. "We're ready for you, Secretary." Hillary nodded, took a breath, and stepped into the spotlight, where decades of experience, political polish, and global reputation stood tall. But for the first time in a long time, so did uncertainty. In the front row, Karoline crossed her legs, eyes locked forward, hands still. Not clapping, not blinking, not backing down. Hillary Clinton took the stage with the poise of someone who had done this 1,000 times. A standing ovation met her entrance, dutiful and enthusiastic, but beneath it all was a faint tremor. A break in the uniform applause as cameras pivoted slightly, catching not just Hillary, but the woman seated in the front row who wasn't clapping, Karoline Leavitt. The room felt it. That one pair of still hands cut louder than the cheers. Hillary smiled wide, but her eyes scanned fast. She saw Karoline, their gazes locked for a single second, a pause sharp enough to cut glass, before Hillary launched into her keynote. "We are at a critical juncture," she began, "not just for women, but for the soul of democracy. We need voices that are tested, voices that are tempered by wisdom, not simply loud." The line was polished, but everyone knew who it was aimed at. Karoline didn't flinch. As Hillary continued, she weaved in subtle digs, referencing reckless newcomers, TikTok ideologues, and those who rise too fast without knowing what the job requires. It was a masterclass in political condescension, smooth, controlled, strategic. Karoline just sat, face unreadable. She took out a notebook, began writing. A few attendees nearby stole glances. One woman nudged her colleague and whispered, "She's writing a response." On the stage, Hillary pushed forward. "There is a difference between having a platform and having something to say," she declared. Again, eyes darted toward Karoline. And then it happened. Karoline slowly closed her notebook. She stood. There was no announcement, no interruption, no microphone, just presence. The room hushed. Even Hillary faltered, her next sentence catching in her throat. Karoline didn't walk to the stage. She didn't need to. She just turned to face the audience, standing tall, uninvited, unamplified, but unmistakably heard. In that moment, the whole ballroom belonged to her. Silence blanketed the ballroom. No music, no cue, no moderator stepping in. Just Karoline Leavitt, standing firm with the kind of poise that didn't need lighting or applause to be seen. 1 second. 2. The pause stretched. And yet, no one moved to stop her. Even Hillary, hands gripping the sides of the podium, didn't interrupt. She simply stared, frozen mid-sentence. Years of experience had taught her how to handle hecklers, protests, staged walkouts. But this was something else. Karoline didn't shout. She didn't raise her voice. She simply began to speak. "I was told to sit back," she said, eyes slowly scanning the crowd. "Told this wasn't my place, that I hadn't earned the right. That experience mattered more than conviction." Her voice was firm but even, not a performance, but a statement. "But the truth is," she continued, "some of us weren't born into invitations. We weren't handed microphones. We had to show up and speak anyway." A collective breath held. She never said Hillary's name. She didn't have to. The contrast was too stark to ignore. The career politician at the podium and the defiant new voice taking the room without permission. Phones were out, dozens of them. Recording, live streaming, uploading. Hillary looked off stage. Her handler mouthed, "Do we cut her mic?" "There is no mic," Hillary muttered. Karoline turned slightly toward her, not out of disrespect, but clarity. "This movement isn't about resumes," Karoline said. "It's about truth, and I don't need a script to tell mine." That line landed like a match on dry leaves. Scattered applause broke the stillness. It started small, a single clap. Then another, then waves. The kind of slow build that wasn't orchestrated by a program but earned, raw and real. Hillary's fingers tightened. Karoline nodded once, then sat down, not dramatically, not like a victor, just finished. And for the first time in her career, Hillary Clinton realized she'd lost a room without losing the mic. The applause didn't stop. In fact, it grew. What had begun as a few hesitant claps quickly rolled into a full wave, not of formality, but of instinct. Attendees weren't reacting to a program, they were reacting to a moment. And in political circles, moments like these were rare. They couldn't be orchestrated, only seized. Karoline Leavitt hadn't been on the speakers list, but now she was the only name people were saying. Backstage, a comms director whispered to Hillary, "We're losing control of the narrative." Hillary clenched her jaw. "No," she said. "We take it back. She doesn't close this event." "I do." She walked back to the podium, smile practiced, voice steady, but her eyes betrayed urgency. "Thank you, ladies," she said into the mic, trying to reclaim authority. "We appreciate all voices, even the unexpected ones, but today is about experience and continuity." There it was, the pivot. The soft condescension wrapped in diplomacy. But the crowd wasn't buying it. Karoline, still seated and silent now, had shifted something deeper than a room's attention. She'd cracked the illusion that access equals power, that if you don't hold the mic, you can't shape the message. Women in their 40s and 50s leaned in. Young interns mouthed wow to each other. Even a few CNN producers on the edge of the room started taking notes not on Hillary, but on Karoline. Someone whispered, "She didn't even speak for 5 minutes," and she flipped the whole room. Outside the venue, social media had exploded. Karoline Leavitt showed up uninvited and stole the summit. This is the first time Hillary's been publicly outshined in her own lane. Mic drop, and she didn't even have one. And then came the headline. Breaking on political blogs and Twitter feeds, Clinton's summit hijacked by rising conservative star. Leavitt's unscripted rebuttal goes viral. The summit wasn't over, but for many watching, the main event had already happened. Hillary Clinton tried to continue. She pushed through the remainder of her speech, but it landed flat. Her lines, once delivered with gravitas, now felt distant, like reading an outdated script after the curtain had already fallen. Each applause line earned less response. Each rhetorical pause was met with silence. The summit wasn't derailed, it had been rewritten, and the new author hadn't asked for permission. Backstage, staff scrambled. Do we cut to the panel early? Should we reintroduce the agenda? Can someone from the press handle the optics? But the optics were already beyond saving. Karoline had returned to her seat, but the energy around her was magnetic. Attendees from both ends of the political spectrum now looked her way, not as an intruder, but as a catalyst, a disruptor. The kind that political machines feared because they couldn't be bought, booked, or blocked. In the hallway, a Democratic strategist murmured, "I hate to admit it, but that girl just did in 3 minutes what our entire comms team hasn't pulled off in 5 years. Karoline, meanwhile, remained composed. No gloating, no selfies, just a soft smile, as if she had known this moment would come all along. Her team had seen none of it. She'd come solo, no PR handlers, no official invite, no pre-approved statement, just her voice. A few reporters tried to approach her for comment. She simply said, "I didn't plan to speak, I just couldn't sit anymore." That line went viral by nightfall. Meanwhile, Hillary's post-summit Q&A was clipped by outlets but largely ignored. The story had shifted, and the algorithms were merciless. One name rose above all others. Karoline Leavitt. In D.C., phones buzzed, advisors whispered. Donors watched the replay on mute and nodded slowly. There was a new power on the scene. Not polished, not appointed, but undeniably potent. And for the first time in decades, Hillary Clinton wasn't the story. She was the scene that set up someone else's. The applause had faded, but the ripple Karoline left behind still stirred the room. Hillary Clinton had taken her seat again, lips pressed into a thin line. She tapped her manicured fingers against the table, her gaze frozen on Karoline as if recalibrating the battlefield. This wasn't just a breach of etiquette, it was a threat to her carefully controlled narrative. Karoline stepped away from the mic without looking back, but her words still echoed in the minds of everyone present. Her message hadn't been wrapped in political correctness. It wasn't rehearsed or calibrated for polling data. It had been raw, human, and exactly what the room didn't expect. Behind the stage, Hillary's chief advisor leaned in. "We need to respond." She hijacked the summit. Hillary's eyes narrowed. She exposed it. The rest of the day went by in a blur of strategic meetings. Clinton's PR machine was already churning, pushing quotes to media allies, crafting the narrative that Karoline had been disrespectful, divisive, even dangerous. They knew how to reframe defiance as arrogance and conviction as instability. But Karoline wasn't waiting for the backlash. She was preparing for it. In a quiet room, away from the cameras, she sat with her team, surrounded by laptops and a flurry of vibrating phones. Offers had already started rolling in. Conservative podcasts, independent platforms, even a few unlikely invitations from moderate liberal hosts who recognized what had just happened. Something real. "She's going to play the dignity card," her campaign manager said. "Frame you as unprofessional." Karoline nodded. "Let her. Because I'm not here to fit her mold." And then she looked straight into the lens of her phone and hit record. No studio lights, no makeup team, just her, sitting by a plain wall, speaking calmly but firmly into the camera. They say I disrupted something. I did. I disrupted silence. They say I was rude. I wasn't. I was honest. They say I should have stayed in my seat. But if I had, none of you would have heard me. It wasn't a press release. It wasn't spin. It was a declaration. Within minutes, the clip was on every social feed. Within an hour, it had hit over 2 million views. Young women shared it with the caption, "This is how we speak now." Parents forwarded it to their college-age kids. Even political opponents were forced to admit, whatever your politics, this was power. And while Hillary's team scrambled to coordinate their next move, one of her own staffers accidentally left a live mic running backstage. "Do we even control the room anymore?" the aide whispered. The answer, unspoken but clear, "Not if Karoline's in it." The following morning, every major news outlet carried the same phrase in some variation. Karoline Leavitt hijacks Hillary Clinton's forum. But the public didn't read it that way, because they had seen it. The full video of Karoline's uninvited speech, shot by an attendee's phone, had been uploaded to multiple platforms. Not clipped, not edited. Raw. And what millions saw wasn't a woman interrupting. It was a woman intervening. She hadn't barged in. She had stepped up when no one else would. Inside campaign war rooms, strategists cursed. Karoline's video had done more in 2 minutes than most passes managed in a year. Even worse for them, it had crossed demographics. Women who didn't align politically with her still admired the conviction. College students who had never voted were suddenly Googling her name. Independent voters posted side-by-side clips of Hillary's polished remarks versus Karoline's raw statement. And the contrast spoke volumes. She didn't just look younger, she looked free. Hillary Clinton's team rolled out surrogates on news panels. The word reckless began trending, but only among legacy commentators. On TikTok and Instagram, younger voters captioned her video with things like, "This is what leadership looks like in 2025? One user stitched a slow zoom close-up of Karoline's unwavering stare and wrote, "She didn't blink, neither will we." Meanwhile, Karoline was already 2 steps ahead. She turned down major interviews, turned away the glamour circuits. Instead, she opted for a small town hall in Ohio, a room of 200 people, folding chairs, no teleprompter. There, she said, "If I can be silenced by scheduling, then so can your story. If truth only fits in neat little boxes, then maybe the whole box needs to be torn open." It was a quiet statement, but its reach was thunderous. Footage from that town hall leaked too. Not because she invited it, but because people recorded it, without being asked. Back in D.C., whispers started. "She's not just a voice anymore. She's a symbol." One former Obama speechwriter tweeted, "Clinton commands a stage. Leavitt takes it. That difference matters now." Later that night, Karoline sat alone in a modest hotel room, her phone buzzing non-stop, but she ignored the calls. Instead, she replayed the moment from the summit, not her own words, but the quiet pause just before she had stood. That silence, that breath, the one that told her, "If you don't rise now, no one will." And when she turned off the screen, she whispered, "That's never happening again." She wasn't aiming to become the story. She had simply decided to stop being edited out of it. It was just past midnight when the phone finally rang. Not a news outlet, not a podcast. It was a private number. No caller ID. Karoline hesitated for a second before answering, half expecting it to be another angry voicemail or a shallow offer for a rebrand opportunity. Instead, a slow and unmistakable voice came through. "You really made a lot of people uncomfortable." It was Hillary. Karoline stood up from the edge of the hotel bed, her posture sharpening instinctively. "Was that your goal?" Hillary continued, almost amused. "Because if it was, congratulations, but you should know. This game doesn't reward spontaneity, it punishes it." There was no threat in her tone, but the chill in the words was unmistakable. Karoline didn't flinch. "I'm not playing a game," she replied. "You think I was?" Hillary's voice lowered. "You think I got here by giving impromptu speeches in other people's forums? You think I didn't want to? I built the system that gave you the mic. I also know how it takes it back. That moment could have been fearsome. It could have shaken a lesser woman. But Karoline wasn't rattled. She was activated. You built it, she said, but you also locked the doors. I didn't break in. I just noticed no one else had the key. There was a pause. Then, be careful, Karoline. She hung up. The silence afterward was heavier than before. Not out of fear, but because Karoline had just been reminded how deep the power ran, that it didn't need to shout. It only needed to whisper when it wanted to warn. The next day, Karoline received notice that her scheduled university event at Columbia had been postponed. Then another cancellation at Duke. One by one, doors began quietly closing. But each one shut only confirmed what she already knew. She had shaken something big. And when an earthquake starts, buildings built on vanity don't survive. Rather than panic, Karoline pivoted. She rented her own space in New Jersey, an old theater built in the 1930s. Paint peeling, seats mismatched, acoustics raw. She filled it with people who couldn't care less about credentials. Veterans, teachers, single mothers, Gen Z students. No security clearance needed, no filtered agenda. If you've ever felt talked over, she told them, you don't need a mic. You need a moment. The crowd exploded in applause, not because she had insulted someone, but because they saw a piece of themselves in her. This wasn't about Hillary anymore. It was about every closed room, every rigged panel, every invitation rescinded because someone wasn't safe enough to speak. She had become the voice you couldn't disinvite. The old theater in New Jersey had no marble columns, no polished brass, no professionally tuned lights. But what it did have was something that couldn't be engineered: authenticity. And that night, every creaky floorboard and flickering bulb played their part as hundreds of people filed in, drawn not by a brand, but by a belief. Karoline stood backstage, gazing through a torn curtain. Her team had warned her, again, about backlash. Networks had doubled down on their attacks. Late-night comedians had turned her into a monologue punchline. And yet, not a single person in that audience looked like they were here for a joke. She stepped forward. No introduction, no music, no countdown. I was told not to stand up, so I did. I was told not to speak, so I did. I was told to apologize, and I didn't. Her voice rang through the room, clear, controlled, deliberate. But this was never about me. It was about how easy it's become to silence people like me, people like you. You don't need to be invited to stand in your truth. You just need to refuse to sit back down. There were no cameras allowed. Yet somehow, the speech spread anyway, like wildfire. Pieces of it, recorded from audience pockets, reached millions within 24 hours. Headlines tried to reframe it. Some called it defiant, others reckless. But among everyday Americans, there was only one word trending: unstoppable. And behind the scenes, something else shifted. Major donors started quietly reaching out, not to tame her, but to ask how they could help. Local organizers offered spaces. Community leaders began using her words in their own events. Even those who disagreed with her politics couldn't deny it anymore. Karoline Leavitt had struck a nerve that the establishment could no longer numb. 1 week later, a message arrived in her inbox. It was short, just 3 lines. You took the stage, they're still talking about it, don't stop now. No name, no sender, just those words. Karoline closed the laptop and smiled. The story that had started with a denial, a step back ordered by someone in power, had ended with a movement no one could contain. And somewhere, in another college auditorium or town hall or crowded subway platform, someone else, some girl told to wait her turn, was standing up too. Because when the stage belongs to one woman who refuses to sit, it starts to belong to everyone. And that's the story they never wanted told. They told Karoline Leavitt to sit down. She stood up. They told her to be quiet. She spoke louder. They told her to follow the script. She tore it apart, in front of everyone. This wasn't just about politics. It was about power. It was about who gets to speak and who gets silenced. But Karoline proved something that night. When they try to lock the door, you don't need a key. You need courage. And courage, my friends, is louder than permission. If this moment stirred something in you, if you've ever felt pushed aside, Talked over? Told to wait your turn? Then remember, you don't need a title to lead. You need a voice and the guts to use it. This is not a real story. It's a dramatized piece of political fiction inspired by real figures. Any resemblance to actual events is purely narrative. If you want more unspoken stories like this, subscribe, share, and never sit back down.